Racism and Black Child and Youth, Inferiorization. As we approach the 21st century, it is essential that Black physicians, scientists, researchers, clinicians, pediatricians, and child psychiatrists understand exactly what is happening to the behavioral, emotional, and physical health of Black people, specifically of Black infants, children, and youth. We must know precisely where we are going and what we must do. Now, more than ever before, we need to apply a systematic understanding to our work in helping to solve the multitude of health problems impacting Black infants, children, youth, parents, and thereby families. By developing such a systematic approach in our perception of the seemingly myriad problems, it is possible to focus more effectively on what must be done to move towards problem solution, what must be done by ourselves as members of the healing profession, and what must be done by Black people to establish a level of health and total functioning that is second to none on this planet. It is now 1987. It is impossible to pick up a newspaper in the United States without seeing one or more articles and references addressing the ever-worsening plight of Black people across the entire age spectrum. There are seemingly non-reducible levels of infant mortality and morbidity. There are Black infants being born with AIDS to parents who are drug addicted and who have AIDS. There are massive numbers of Black infants being born to children who never will be able to parent them effectively. The same infants and children will experience physical, social, and psychological neglect. These children will experience physical and sexual abuse. They will experience being inadequately housed, clothed, and fed. They will experience abandonment to welfare systems and foster homes. They subsequently will experience failure to achieve academically and then fail to perform adequately on scholastic achievement tests. Because of their frustration from being stressed and inadequately cared for, they will fail to attend school. Eventually, they will drop out of school. Many Black children and youth will become involved with drugs, either to medicate often unrecognized major depression or to sell drugs to solve their own or their family's financial difficulties. Perhaps both. The drugs will be used to suspend briefly a grinding sense of hopelessness and doom. Then addiction sets in. Other Black children and youth will become obsessed with sexual activity to compensate for a profound sense of unmet dependency needs that immature and overwhelmed parents could not and cannot address. The outcome from this will be AIDS, other venereal diseases, male and female prostitution, and another generation of teenage pregnancy and inadequate parenting. The destroyed sense of self, the negative self-image and self-concept that derive from these overwhelming and stressful circumstances, lead these children and youth to conclude that it is acceptable to use drugs and to sell drugs to one another. And, in ever-increasing numbers, Black children and youth are concluding that it is perfectly all right to shoot and kill one another when drug deals go badly, or to kill one another for an expensive pair of shoes or sunglasses, designer sweatsuits, leather gold chains, or clothing. Both these activities lead to their certain incarceration. By now, every thinking Black person is familiar with these all too common reports and their accompanying statistics. However, scientists and clinicians, as opposed to mere technicians, should not simply gather statistical data. The statistical data must be examined, understood, and interpreted in depth, then placed in proper perspective. Such a process allows for the problems that are reflected in the statistical data to be solved and prevented from occurring in the future. Generally, it is assumed that a society or social power system seeks to support the development of all of its infants, children, and youth. This is a qualitatively erroneous assumption in a social power system built upon racism for the purpose of white genetic survival. The assumption is erroneous even when the white supremacy system is highly refined and masked. Thus far, Black people have failed to decode fully the power system established to maintain white genetic survival. And to the same extent that we have failed to understand white genetic survival or white supremacy, we have failed to control the symptoms that arise from this destructive power dynamic, which is positioned against the maximal development of Black genetic and constitutional potential. In a social power system established for white genetic survival, children classified as non-white are inferiorized systematically so that they will become and remain dependent and susceptible to control throughout their lives. In the terminology of Eric H. Erickson, author of Childhood and Society, when the social environment supports the developing fetus, infant, child, and youth into adult existence, the child's psycho-social Development advances through the following 8 stages: 1. Basic trust, autonomy; 3. Initiative, industry, identity; 6. Intimacy, generativity; and finally, 8. Integrity. However, each one of these 8 stages has its counterpart in failure when society fails to support the child systematically. Instead, the social power system subjects the infant, child, and youth to an overwhelming degree of stress. Instead of basic trust, there is mistrust. Instead of autonomy, there is shame and doubt. Instead of initiative, there is guilt. Instead of industry, there is inferiority. Instead of identity, there is role confusion. Instead of intimacy, there is isolation. Instead of generativity, there is stagnation. Instead of integrity, there is despair. This process of failed psychosocial development, which is brought on by all levels of environmental stress that occur under white supremacy domination and impact Black people most heavily, forces massive numbers of Black infants, children, and youth into the destructive chain of events that I have referred to as the process of inferiorization, mistrust, shame and doubt, guilt, inferiority, role confusion, isolation, stagnation, and finally, despair. Thus, while large numbers of white infants, children, and youth receiving societal and environmental support progress through the 8 stages of psychosocial development, their Black counterparts, the recipients of high-level environmental stress, progress through the stages of failed psychosocial development or inferiorization. It is within this schema that the deteriorating picture of Black life must be understood. This is not the accidental development of an underclass. This is planned inferiorization for the purpose of white genetic survival. Most important, clinicians caring for Black infants, children, youth, and their families must understand that this destructive dynamic is historically and solidly situated, and it is ongoing. However, it is not possible to comprehend the process of inferiorization of Black youth and the seriously compromised functioning of the Black adult without a specific understanding of racism as the struggle for genetic survival on the part of the genetically recessive global white minority population that currently controls power in the world. Because few Blacks or other non-whites understand racism at this level, they fail to understand white supremacy as actual systematic warfare being conducted by people who classify themselves as white, against people whom whites classify as non-whites. Few Blacks or other non-white people are aware that white people are conducting major discussions on the white birth rate. Few Blacks or other non-white people are aware that white scholars and experts are discussing the projection that by the year 2073, whites will represent fewer than 3% of the people on the planet. Few Blacks or other non-white people are aware that white experts are projecting that within 6 to 9 generations, non-white people will represent the majority of people in. Us few Blacks or other non-white people are aware that these white experts are concluding that they will be left in a state of peril if these facts are ignored. The war for white genetic survival is conducted simultaneously on 9 battlefronts: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. The war is conducted through all forms of behavior. In addition, within each of these areas of activity, there have evolved myriad institutions, all of which further the goal of white supremacy. Because Blacks and other non-white people have failed to understand racism as white genetic survival, they erroneously have believed that they could be integrated into the white supremacy system, and that they could depend upon whites to maximally develop Black infants, children, and youth in the same manner that white people promote the maximal development of white infants, children, and youth. Blacks and other non-whites have failed to understand that if white people were to do this, it would mean active white participation in white genocide. Black people must master this perception of racism as a war for white genetic survival, a system into which non-white people never can be integrated. Under the stress of white supremacy, numerous offspring prevent the possibility of adequately meeting the needs of each individual child, as each child crowds out the opportunity for emotional nurture of the others. This crowding prevents high-level psychosocial development from taking place. This promotion and insurance of failed psychosocial development is the process of inferiorization, which in turn promotes and ensures local and global white genetic survival. What then is to be done? What short and long-range strategies and tactics do Blacks need to employ in order to neutralize the ongoing white supremacy thrust for white genetic survival, which is achieved through Black infant, child, and youth inferiorization? As an initial response to this important question, all Black people must abandon the illusion of integration and face the difficult reality that most Black people prefer to ignore. You do not win a chess game if you have no knowledge of the exact objective and rules of the game. It is imperative that all Black people understand they are not in a benign environment of benevolence and support, and that the surrounding highly structured environment is deadly. A very specific warfare is being waged against Blacks and other people classified as non-white in this social system. Further, all must understand that the specific war is racism for the purpose of white genetic survival by any and all necessary means, inclusive of chemical and biological warfare. Additionally, Black people must recognize the following points. The war of white genetic survival achieves a major effect through inferiorization or failed psychosocial development, creating dependency, negative self-image, negative self-concept, and vulnerability. 2. The war of white genetic survival attacks the functioning of Blacks in general, but most specifically attacks the Black male, as it is the Black male who most specifically threatens white genetic survival at a level the Black female is unable to approach. 3. Blacks must learn to counter the thrust of white supremacy and Black inferiorization effectively. 4. Blacks must discuss openly those means by which Black male infants, children, and youth can be supported and developed maximally in order to counter the attack of white supremacy on Black male development and functioning. 5. Black male infants, children, and youth need their fathers constantly present to support the behavior and identity of Black male children. And, because of the historic removal of Black fathers from homes, classes are needed to promote high-level functioning of Black males in their roles as fathers. The white supremacy attack upon the Black male causes a collapse of Black family life and a distortion in the role of the Black female. This in turn causes a distortion and collapse of the support system for Black infants, children, and youth, thereby beginning the process of inferiorization. 7. Blacks must think about and openly discuss, not how to beg white people to stop racism, but instead, how Black people can organize their own behavior on an ongoing basis, specifically to neutralize white supremacy and its impact on the development of Black offspring. It is futile to beg white people to give grants and funds to foster the maximal development of Black people. To do so is to ask white people to commit white genocide. 9. Blacks must be able to discuss openly the logical necessity for Black inferiorization in white struggle for white genetic survival. 10. The singing of "We Shall Overcome" will not combat white supremacy or Black inferiorization, any more than singing any song will help to solve a problem in medicine or physics. Immature and overwhelmed fathers and mothers cannot promote psychosocial development and counter Black inferiorization in the next generation. 12. Single female teenagers cannot promote psychosocial development in male or female offspring, and most certainly, they cannot develop male offspring. They only can prepare these male offspring to spend their lives in penal institutions, while preparing their own daughters to become teenage mothers. 13. No Black female should become a mother before 30 years of age. No Black male should become a father before 35 years of age. Each Black family should have no more than 2 children, no closer together than 3 years apart, and both Black males and females should, at a minimum, complete high school and become fully self-sufficient before marriage and parenthood. These structures are specifically for the purpose of countering the thrust of Black inferiorization and failed psychosocial development under the conditions of white supremacy. Maximal development of the collective Black genetic and constitutional potential will take place by the efforts of Black people alone, through their knowledge, understanding, and behavior. It is my hope that eventually every Black person in the healing profession will master an understanding of the etiologic chain that leads to Black inferiorization. Furthermore, it clearly would be to the benefit of Black people if Black professionals, in their efforts of healing, pass on this knowledge to their Black patients, enabling the patients to neutralize the impact of white supremacy on their lives and achieve a development of their Black genetic and constitutional potential second to none.